What's up, guys? Very fun position here that you are going to enjoy. Trust me, there's a lot more going on here than what you might initially think. So it's white to play and win. White's pawns are going forward. Before I say anything else, what do you think the winning move is for white? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, the winning move here is knight to g4. And knight to g4 has a very interesting threat attached to it. But before we do that, let me just talk about a couple of other moves here. If you said maybe bringing your rook over, getting ready to push the pawn, that doesn't work because black simply brings the rook over and is going to take your pawn next move, so that's not a good idea. The other thing that probably jumped out at a lot of you is just grabbing this pawn for free here. And while you do win a pawn, black's going to jump back over, threaten this. Yes, you can take here, and you might think that this is a winning endgame, but it's actually not, because once black's king gets into the game, let me push our pawn. The king now stops this. Yes, we have our pawn pushing, but then black starts pushing their pawn, and you kind of just get this pawn race. And it turns out that this is just a drawn position. And actually, if you try too hard to win, trying to set this up, you can actually lose this position because now black's the one who's going to get the queen, right? They're going to just sacrifice, and then they get the queen and they win. Okay, so that's just basically there's not much else you can do there. Okay, once the king escapes like that, it's not going to be good. So knight to g4 is the winning move because of this idea of going to f6 and checkmating the king. This is actually an interesting mating pattern here. For example, if black is sleeping and doesn't know what's going on, they play d4. You're going to go knight to f6, and there's no way for black to stop this checkmate. There's just the rook and the knight can't defend that. The king can't escape, and there's nothing for black to do. They're going to get checkmated just like this. Really nice checkmate, right? So that's the idea behind knight to g4. We would like to just go here if black doesn't stop us. Okay, so black needs to figure out a way to stop that from happening. And there's actually two ways that they could do that. So we're going to start with number one, if they move the king to g8 to attack our rook. Because now if we go knight to f6, of course, they just take our rook and we're running out of pieces. We lose, okay? So what do we do if they play king to g8? You had a chance to look at that. There's only one right move here, and if you get this wrong, you're not going to win. But it's knight to h6 check. And that kind of makes sense as a check. It also defends our rook, and it forces the king, importantly, back into the corner. Okay? And now, what do we play? White to play and win. You had a chance to look at that. It's f6. And what we're doing is creating what's called a mating net. Now, in chess, a mating net is when you have your opponent's king sort of trapped in an area of the board and they just can't get out of it, okay? Even if you don't have an immediate checkmate, once you kind of trap them like that, a lot of times you can figure out a way over the next couple of moves to get a checkmate, right? A lot of times it happens in the corner, but it could happen in other areas of the board as well. But that's what we have here. The pawn and the rook and the knight are all keeping that king trapped to where it can't escape, okay? So black tries to hold on here and plays rook to e8. What's the winning move here for white? You had a chance to look at that. It's rook to g7. And basically, again, we're pushing, if I can talk, pushing that, mating that even smaller, using the rook now, and opening up the square on f7 for the knight to go in. Okay, and so black has to deal with this. How are you going to do it? I mean, there's not a lot you can do. You can try to get your rook ready to sacrifice, but it's white to play and win. What do we play here? You had a chance to look at that. Not knight to f7. Rook to g8 check. Notice the king can't take because of our knight. The rook has to take, and look at this incredible position. I mean, look at this. This is absolutely mind-boggling. It's a type of smothered checkmate, but very, very weird setup with the pawn helping. I mean, it's really nice, okay? So that's the idea, and there's really nothing that black can do to prevent that, okay, once they go for this route. So going back here, when we played knight to g4, threatening to go here, this was if black played king to g8 to try to stop us. They don't have to do that, right? And probably a better try for them would be the move rook to g8. Now, rook to g... Well, before I say anything, what do we play against rook to g8? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is knight to h6 in this case. And the reason we don't want to go knight to f7 here is because, yes, we're threatening the checkmate, and it almost looks pretty good. It almost looks like, wait a second, they try to block us, but then we sneak down to the back rank, and we get checkmate a different way, right? Almost, but watch what black's going to do instead. They're not going to go to g7. They're going to go all the way down with check, and then they're going to swing the rook over here to defend like this. Okay, and yes, we can continue with king to b4, and the game's going to go on. It's probably still slightly better for us, but we're not winning right away, and this is not the solution to the puzzle. Okay, so that's the idea of rook to g8. Clever way to kind of defend against knight to f6. So knight to h6 again is the move attacking the rook, and watch what happens now if black comes down and tries the same idea. We're going to go here. They can swing around trying to defend like this, but we actually have a really nice move here, white to play and win. Got a chance to look at that. The move is f6. And again, that idea of a mating net, right? We're keeping that king trapped. And even though we're sacrificing our knight to do it, there's no way for black to stop this. It's still checkmate. It's a back rank checkmate now, but by using this pawn to help us, okay? And of course, the king couldn't run because the knight was there. And so there's really nothing for black to do. So super nice idea behind knight to h6 if black decides to come down here and go for that same plan. Okay, but of course they don't have to do that, and a better try is if they just go rook to e8. Now it's white to play and win. What should we play here? You had a chance to look at that. The move is f6. Again, that same idea, right? We're keeping that king trapped, and we're using this pawn help us. Okay, so black says, well, I don't really have a lot of options. I can come down here with a random check, but that doesn't really do much. The king's just going to escape or even just move here, and I still have all of these different problems. So black says instead, I'm going to go with knight to c8, trying to relocate my knight to a better square where it can start defending against some of these annoying threats. Okay? Looks like a logical idea. What do we play? White to play and win. If you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook takes d7. Now, Stockfish seems to think rook g7 is actually the better way to do it and is a better move, but we're going to follow what the composer thought of when he made this puzzle, and that was the move rook takes d7. Okay? And you're going to see the idea here in just a second. I don't want to spoil it just yet, but pay close attention to what's happening over these next couple of moves. So black says, okay, I will go rook to f8, attacking the pawn. And what do we play now? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is rook to g7. And we're ignoring this because, of course, if the rook takes it, guess what? That's just checkmate. Another type of checkmate that we see here. So we don't have to defend it. But we're also continuing to keep that king trapped in the mating net and set up all these different checkmate threats. And right now we have a very big one. If you remember from previously, what is our biggest threat here, actually? Let me ask you this. If black makes a mistake and pushes this pawn, what are we going to play? If you had a chance to look at that, it's rook to g8 check. It's the same idea that we saw earlier. Look at this beautiful smothered checkmate. So by going to g7, we are threatening that, okay? So what does black do? Instead, they play knight to d6. And knight to d6, notice, is very important because it controls that square. So if we try to do the same thing, black says, thank you very much. I've got that defended, okay? So what do we do? White to play and win. We had a chance to look at that. The move is, wait for it, king to c2. That's it. Just a simple king move. And what we are doing is putting black in Zugzwang. Now, if you remember, Zugzwang is where you have to move, but you don't want to move, right? That's essentially the position that black is finding himself in. The king is already stuck in the corner. You can't move. The pawn is already stuck. You can't move it. The rook doesn't want to move because where could the rook move to? Well, if you take here, that's checkmate. Okay. If you move over here, well, then you're going to get checkmated a different way, which we'll come back to in just a second. If the knight moves, let's just say here, I don't know. We already saw this one, right? The knight has to stay there to defend that. You just don't want to move anything if you're black, okay? So they can throw in a check. We just move our king, and then they go back. Again, what do we play here? Well, it's the same idea. We just wait. Anything like rook g5, rook g4, something like this. And again, it's the same issue that black has. Like, well, I don't really want to move anything because if I do, I'm in trouble. For example, they move, let's just say over here. How do we finish off the game? Get a chance to look at that. The move is f7, and here's another threat that was kind of hiding in the position. And the problem is, of course, the knight can't take because here's another checkmate. I don't know how many different patterns we've seen already. And if they don't stop us, we're just going to come here. So, for example, this is the threat. Check. Checkmate. You can do it with the queen or a rook, right? And again, checkmate. And so there's just nothing for black to do. Yes, you can get a random check. That doesn't help you. You still have this problem, which you can't stop, right? And remember, this happened because the rook moved away, right? The rook and the knight were kind of defending this, but as soon as that moves away, it opens up this opportunity. And so really there's nothing for black to do except push this pawn and then white to play and win. That's correct. There's quite a few ways you could do it, but the simplest is just to push this pawn b4. And again, it's the same thing. Black has to move one of these pieces and they lose. They can choose how they want to get checkmated. I think the coolest one in my opinion is this way, right? With the smother checkmate, but any of those like we talked about lead to checkmate. So incredible position when you really think about how that started, right? I mean, look at this end position. You go back to the beginning here. This simple move of knight to g4 started all of that because you were threatening knight to f6. We talked about, king g8. We talked about the rook coming over. Just goes to show you the power of mating nets in chess. When you have somebody's king stuck in the corner with not a lot of pieces defending it, even a rook, a knight, and a pawn can be enough to win the game. Incredible stuff, right? Hope you guys enjoyed that. I know I did. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.